And so once you created the Open Lab, what you want to do is click visit the course site. You can do some stuff here, like if you go to my profile, you can change your image, you can add some information in here. You don't need to do that right now, but it might be fun to do that at some point. But ultimately, what we want to do is go over to the course site. And you can see a lot of you guys have already showed up down here under the blog authors. Um, and then we're going to go over to the schedule. So once you're on the course site, you can go to the links and click on schedule. And that takes you to my little web page where I post my demos and notes and things. And we'll look at a lot of this stuff in here later, like, for example, previous student work, some old examples, things like that. But for now, we're just going to kind of talk about what we're doing in this class in general. So we're going to talk about JavaScript, which is the programming language that we're going to be using to learn a little bit of the basics of coding or programming or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to click on this JavaScript intro link here. And I'm going to put this link in the chat so you guys can open this on your own computer if you want to follow along. And I'm going to be using something inside the browser to actually write code, something called the console, which we'll talk about throughout the semester. And it's kind of cool. You guys might find it kind of interesting. One thing that you'll notice with these notes that I host is that there's this kind of default blog view. So if you're just reading it, you can just read it. It just looks like a blog. But I also have like this little slides view. I don't really need this as much these days since I teach online, but or I don't only teach online, but oh, whoops. Since I'm teaching online most of the time, um, I don't need this as much, but it's still kind of fun to do these little slides. Although my buttons are not working. What's going on with this? I think I need to reset something. Oh boy. Okay, so anyway, this is what I'll usually be looking at it, is this kind of like slides view. And what I did right now is I just opened this thing called the console. So if you've taken some multimedia classes before, you might have actually seen this before. But if you haven't, that's okay. A lot of you guys probably haven't. Um, the browser, pretty much all the browsers have some version of this now, like Safari or Firefox. Um, and what this is a way for me to write JavaScript directly into the browser. So we're going to be using JavaScript in the class. And there's a bunch of reasons for that I'll get into in a second. But one of the main reasons, or one great thing about JavaScript is it's literally in your browser. So you can write JavaScript without doing anything else. Like you can write code and see what it does without downloading another program, compiling some crazy crap on Java or C++, having a special computer, pretty much any computer. If you're on a browser, you can open up this thing called the console and you can just start writing code and just see what happens. So it's a lot easier to use and to see the result of your program than basically any other type of environment that you'll ever use. So that's one of the reasons I like it. There's a lot of other reasons I like it that I'll get into. But anyway, the way that you can do that is you can right click on the browser and go to inspect. And that actually brings up this like little elements tab, which shows you the HTML, which isn't really what we want. What we want is this console over here. There's a couple other ways to get there. I can click on the dots in the browser and go to Tools and go to Developer Tools. That's going to open this little window as well. I can also, if I'm on Mac, I can just hit Command Option J, and that'll bring me there. On Windows, I think it's Control Shift J, but I'm not on Windows right now. Anyway, this brings up this little console thing. You don't have to do this. I'm going to increase the size to make it a little bit more visible. I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit. And you can just write code here. So I can say, like, what's 1 plus 1? And, that's not exciting, but it does what I want it to do. So that's one of the nice things about JavaScript. You guys can actually start writing code directly into your browser just immediately. And I'm going to use this to do some examples as I talk about JavaScript. I recommend that you guys follow along. Just try typing it out. Just get your fingers ready and see how it feels to write some code. It might be fun. So yeah, so if you want to open your browser, open up the console and follow along. I'm not going to be typing anything too crazy, but just want to show some examples. Okay, so we're talking about JavaScript, and as I mentioned, JavaScript is the programming language of the web, of the internet. It was created specifically to be used with the internet. And while it was not really considered a very serious programming language when it first came out in the 90s, it has become literally the most important and most desired programming language for any developer. And I'm not even joking. Like if we look up Stack Overflow developer survey, and we look at let's see, what is the most important, where's the, maybe this is something else. I'm gonna do a different search. Popular languages. Okay, let's see, technology, most popular technologies. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Most popular technologies. So all respondents, professional developers. Okay, in both cases, JavaScript is the first one. It's 65% of all respondents, and it's 69% of all professional developers. So this language that was originally just invented to stick into a browser just to do some basic stuff developed over the course of almost 30 years to become the most important language that you can learn and the most marketable language that you can learn. That's not why I teach it. I just actually like using it, but it's a good reason to learn it as well. So let's talk a little bit about JavaScript. So as I mentioned, it was created in the 90s, 1995. It's specifically designed to work with websites. So if you took MMP 100, you made an HTML website with a basic HTML and basic CSS. And basically what JavaScript does, you probably remember HTML is just content. It's just text, images, things like that. And CSS is just styling. It's colors, backgrounds, fonts, things like that. But those things can't do animation, or they can do a little bit, but they can't really do animation. They can't do interactivity. You can't make a game with those things. So what people wanted was a programming language, a real programming language that was bundled with HTML and CSS with the browser, so you could make interactive content. You could make games and interactive videos, interactive animations, all sorts of different stuff. And so that's why it was built. There's a couple of links here to some what I find really interesting, but would probably be boring to you if you are not already a JavaScript lover. But if you want to learn a lot about JavaScript, this What is JavaScript page kind of goes over a lot of stuff, and it's written by MDN, which is the authority. They wrote it, and they have a big part of maintaining it. MDN stands for Mozilla Developer Network. It's the people who make Firefox and other software. So MDN is the best kind of like resource, and I'll link to it a lot. This is a basic overview. I don't expect you guys to read through everything in here, but it's a good place to start if you want to learn more. The other one is this video by one of the guys who wrote JavaScript, a guy named Douglas Crockford, who has written multiple of my favorite books about programming. And he has this lecture series. This is actually chapter 2, because chapter 1 goes before JavaScript. It talks about a lot of other languages that kind of led to the development of JavaScript. But this is really where you want to get started if you want to learn about JavaScript. And it's a lecture. It's kind of boring, but if you like JavaScript, once you get to know it more, you'll probably find it pretty interesting. So that's something you may want to go back to at some point. And I forget how many, there's like a bunch of videos in this series. So yeah, those are a couple of resources if you want to look more in depth. One Quick thing to mention is that there's often confusion between these two languages, Java, which is just Java, and JavaScript, which is Java with script at the end. They sound similar, obviously, but they're absolutely not related to each other at all. And it's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter that much, but it'll just save you, if you're in an interview and they say, what programming languages do you know? And you say Java, but you really mean JavaScript, you're going to be embarrassed. So just letting you guys know that right from the bat, that Java is a different language. It's a great language. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it, but it's not JavaScript, and they don't come from the same place. It's literally just they have the same name for various weird marketing reasons. But just to get that out of the way. So I've already talked about all this. So we're going to talk about what we're really going to be talking about in this class is using code to do art and design. Um, the reason we're doing that is because it's fun and I enjoy art and design more than I do like, writing software to do your taxes or to maintain a database or whatever. But the important thing to remember is that all programming languages use the same basic concepts. So the concepts you're going to learn in this class, even though we're going to be talking about design, we're going to be talking about art, those concepts are going to be related to literally any code that you'll ever read or write anywhere, whether it's backend for a bank or a AI or a any type of program. They all use the same core concepts, and this class is going to introduce uh, not all of them, but a good number of them. One of the main concepts that we're going to be talking about is what can we do with programming that we can't do with other tools. So if we want to make a design, you can draw something on a piece of paper, you can take a photograph of something, you can use software to design a logo, you can use Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or other programs. The thing that you can't do with those tools is you can't make interactive work. And that's kind of what I mean by static versus dynamic. If you paint a painting, it may be a great painting, and I love paintings, but paintings can't change based on their environment, and that's what we can do with code. That's one of the things that makes code exciting. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on in the class because that's what one of the things that code lets us do that other mediums don't. So this idea of static versus dynamic, you can make a great design, but what we want to do is make a great design, but we also want to use code to make it interactive, to make it generative, to do things that we can't do with these other media. So we're going to be looking at animation, interaction, generative work, things that are dynamic, things that can change over time. That's what code allows us to do that other mediums don't. I already opened the console, but I'm talking about it now. So again, here's how we get to the console. Uh, Command Alt J for Mac, Control Shift J for Windows. That'll bring up this guy. And now we're going to see what we can do with some code using this console. If you're using Firefox or Safari, if you're using Firefox, I don't remember what the key commands are, but you can find it in the menu. If you're using Safari, you actually have to turn on the developer tools first by going to Preferences and going to the Advanced tab. It's a lot more work. So if you want to do it on there, you can, but it's a little bit easier to do it in Chrome. Anyway, we're going to learn a little bit of code tonight. Nothing too crazy, but just to see what it looks like. And one of the things that you may not even realize is that code generally pretty much always involves typing. So it's not like using Photoshop or using Illustrator or After Effects or other programs that you may have used in your animation courses, your multimedia courses. It's more like writing something in a notebook or writing something on a word processor. Most of the time, we're going to be typing, and then we run the code to see what the result is. So there's a lot of typing. You know, that's just kind of how it works. And there's certain rules about how we can type and what we can type, and some of them are easy to learn, some of them are harder to learn. And we're just going to start really, really basic. So when we type a line of code, there's a few different terms that we can use for it. One is an expression. So we're expressing something with code. One is a statement, which is kind of a synonym of expression. We're making a statement. There's a few other terms, but those are kind of the main ones. So a very simple statement that we can make in code is we can say 2 plus 2. And you can see the console is going to tell me the answer to that. If I hit enter, it's going to print it out. So that first one that we see is just like a little preview. And then once we hit enter, it does what's called executing the statement. So it actually runs the statement. And that means that the computer looks at the statement and then tells us, what the result of that statement is. So, we can say 1 plus 1. Uh, we can say 999 plus 1. Basic math, it can do that. We could say 1 minus 1, that'll give us 0. So that's a really simple statement. It's not something that we're actually going to do. We're not going to do, well, we will do some basic math, but not just for the sake of doing math. So let's keep going. So just a quick note on the console, and we'll have a whole lesson on this, but the console is really here for helping us as programmers, like learn about our code. So if we have problems with our code, we'll get errors in the console. If we want to like learn things about the code, we can log things to the console. So, normal people who are just browsing the internet, they don't open the console and do stuff with it. But as developers, it's a really useful tool that we can use to test things and also just, see what happens if we write some code. So as I mentioned, expressions, just a simple, line of code. Few other arithmetic expressions that we can do. So obviously you have addition and subtraction. We can also do multiplication, which uses the asterisk, which is above the 8 key on the keyboard. So if I do 2 and then I have to hold shift and hit 8, it gives me an asterisk, which is the sign for multiply. 2 times 2, that's also 4. 2 times 5 is 10. And we can do division. Division uses the forward slash. So it looks like a division sign. On the keyboard, we call it a forward slash. So if we want to do some division, we can say 12 divided by 4. If we say 12 divided by 5, we'll get a little decimal point. So we can do division as well. Okay. We can also use parentheses, and we use parentheses a lot to group things. You may have used parentheses in math to group parts of an expression, like if you want to add something before you multiply it. We can do the same thing in code. So in this example, 2 plus 2 times 5 is going to be 12. And that's because of the order of operations in math. If we have a statement in math, it doesn't go from left to right. It starts with the order of operations. And multiply is before addition. So what happens with this statement is it actually does this first. 2 times 5 is 10. And then it adds 2 afterwards. That's how we get 12. If we want to do 2 plus 2 first, then we need to use grouping. So we can use parentheses to do grouping. So the parentheses are just those like round things that are on the 9 and the 0 normally on the keyboard. Again, I have to hold shift to get an open parentheses. That's the first one. And then 2 plus 2, and then a close parentheses. So that groups that statement together. And now after I do that, I'm going to multiply by 5, and I get 20. So 2 plus 2 first is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. So we can group stuff. The math part doesn't matter as much. The part that we're looking at is how to group things. Okay. Some errors. So if you write something that the computer can't do, it's going to give you an error. And we'll go over this in a lot more detail in a few weeks, or like in 2 weeks. So if I say something like this, 2 space 2, I forgot to put an operator here, right? Like I was supposed to put plus, but I forgot. I just said 2, 2. It's going to say unexpected number. So for a program, just having one number after another, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't mean anything, right? Like if I say like 2 times 5, what am I trying? That doesn't make any sense, right? What am I trying to do there? So the computer really doesn't know what I'm doing. And so it gives me this big red X and it says, you can't do that. And the errors, it kind of tells us a little bit about what's going wrong, but it doesn't give us exactly what's going wrong. So it says unexpected number. So what that really means is that I forgot to put a plus or a multiply, whatever I was trying to do. I just forgot to put it. And so that's why I got that error. And we'll talk about that more in a bit. Okay, Boolean expressions. Let's stop here because the next few bit of things are going to be related. So we'll pick up with this on next Monday. So this is a good place to stop. I'm gonna put this right here, and